It's a lovely morning here at the Pingpei Lodge, Pingpei Resort. And last morning here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about two languages spoken here in Suriname. One is the local language here in the Maroon communities, the Saramaccan language. A lot of people say Saramaccan in English. Most of the folks here I hear, they put the emphasis at the end, Saramaccan. And the Sranan Tongo, the Surinamese Creole language, which is the lingua franca spoken all over the country, which I've been studying. I've been learning Sranan Tongo, and we got here 4 days ago, here in Maroon Country. The Maroon community is here along the Suriname River, and since the first day we got here, we chatted with the folks here at the lodge. I was wondering, how different would the language here be from Sranan Tongo? Would it be entirely different? Would there be some relation? And because I had heard that they were different languages, and then when I got here, it seemed very similar. A lot of the beginner simple phrases people told me, they were very similar to the way you would say it in Surinamese Creole, in Sranan Tongo. So I was thinking, like, how much of a difference is there between these two languages? And but then I talked to people from here, and then people who grew up in the capital, in Paramaribo. And so I talked to people who had grown up speaking Sranan Tongo, and people who had grown up here speaking Saramaccan. And they said that they're completely different, that they're not mutually comprehensible. You can't understand the other one. Our guide here at the lodge, Marshall, he grew up here, and he said how when he the first time he went to the capital, to Paramaribo, it took him a lot of effort to learn Sranan Tongo. It was a different language. He couldn't just go around speaking Saramaccan. And also talked to a guy who had grown up in the capital, same thing. He was here on with a tour group, and he told us that he cannot understand the local language, Saramaccan. And I was wondering how they seem so similar. And I was thinking about examples from Europe. A lot of Europeans come here. And the Europeans always talk about how there will be these language pairs that are very similar linguistically, but people who speak one language can understand the other one sometimes not. Most tourists here in Suriname are Dutch. And all of them talk about how they can understand Germans when Germans speak, but Germans cannot understand them. And it's this weird sort of one direction thing. And I don't know how much of that is, cultural, or it has to do with the language itself, or a mentality thing. So then I realized a couple days ago, I remembered that I had downloaded a document onto my phone. It's a full linguistic profile of the Saramaccan language. And by now, I feel like I've got a decent handle on the Sranan Tongo language, the Surinamese Creole, the general language. And this document is by my favorite linguist, John McWhorter, brilliant linguist. And he authored this full profile, linguistic profile of Saramaccan language. The introduction has this amazing description of the background, the history of the Saramaccan language. And so I'll get into the history a bit. But basically, as I read through the linguistic details, I realized, these are very different languages. They are very similar. They evolved from a common root, but they are different. And I realized even there are simple sentences like "the man is eating." Every single word in that would be different in Sranan Tongo and Saramaccan. You'll see a relationship between the two, but they're different words. Probably the closest, man is mang in Sranan Tongo. Here it's womi, from woman, because there's a lot of Portuguese influence. But every single word of that, even the word for thee, it's a in Sranan Tongo. It's di in Saramaccan. And the word for eat is the closest, nyang in Sranan Tongo, and I believe, I'll butcher it, I won't try it. It's close to nyang, but it's something like anyanye, or nyanyi. But different languages for sure. And John McWhorter, he compares them to languages, like all the Scandinavian languages, are very related. There are actually 5 or 6 different Creole languages spoken out here in the Maroon communities, and he talks about that being there's a comparison between the Slavic languages. Sorry, I got distracted. One of the young ladies who works here, she was walking by. Maybe she thought I was filming her, but I'm holding the camera toward myself. So he talks about the Slavic languages also, especially the close ones like Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian. Those 3 are very close. There is some mutual comprehensibility, but they are different languages. So there are 5 or 6 Maroon languages specifically, but it sounds like they all evolved from a common language spoken on the plantations in like 1600s, 1700s, near Paramaribo, along the coast near the capital. And before the Dutch ever came and took over Suriname, because it used to be an English colony. It was an English colony, but there were a lot of plantation owners who were Portuguese. They were Portuguese Jewish people. They'd come up from Brazil, and they all came up right about the same time and took over a lot of plantations. So there was a period where a lot of Portuguese plantation owners came, and so there was a heavy influence from the Portuguese language. Before that, the people enslaved on the plantations, they had developed a common language with a lot of English vocabulary because it was an English colony, but also with a very West African structure and grammar. John McWhorter names the specific West African languages that lend all these linguistic elements to both Sranan Tongo and Saramaccan. But Saramaccan branches off from it when the people escape slavery. And I mean, we're talking thousands of people managed to escape, and they just came so far that the white people wouldn't come looking for them anymore. They came all the way out here into the jungle, far, far away from the plantations, the capital, and just started a new life, formed new communities. They learned a lot from the native people living here, what foods to eat, medicinal foods in the jungle. So at that time, that's before the Dutch had ever come. So there's a lot of Portuguese influence from those Portuguese plantation owners. And that still exists in Saramaccan. You hear lots of words that are very similar to Spanish and Portuguese that you don't hear in the general Surinamese Creole, which evolved on its own line and had more influence from West European languages. The Dutch eventually take over Suriname. They traded it to the English actually for the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam, which the English then renamed New York. That's New York. That's where that comes from. And so then the Dutch took over Suriname, and so now after a few centuries, you have a lot of Dutch influence in the general Sranan Tongo language, which you don't see here in the Saramaccan language. So that's a big element of confusion for people who come here speaking Surinamese Creole, Sranan Tongo, is there's just this heavy Portuguese lexicon in Saramaccan here. And there are also some other elements. McWhorter talks about a lot of grammatical elements that remained from the African languages here that were eventually lost in Sranan Tongo. And so he says that of all of the English-based Creoles in the world, the ones that exist in Africa and Sierra Leone, in the Caribbean, all over the world, he says the most heavy on African influence, African elements, linguistic elements is Saramaccan right here. Like, it's the one that preserves most African linguistic characteristics. So I'm fascinated by this country, especially this region coming out here. I mean, it's a linguist's dream, and for any language nerd, it's just a dream come true. It's such a cool place to get to interact and not just read about these languages, but you're out here, where people are speaking them, and then you're realizing how far you can get out here. A lot of people only speak Saramaccan. They don't speak Sranan Tongo. A lot of people who have been back and forth between the capital, obviously they've learned Sranan Tongo as well. That's the lingua franca for the whole country. And So as my Sranan Tongo has gotten stronger, I'm able to speak with some people, but even people who only speak Saramaccan, I can get up to a certain point where they understand me. Obviously, I'm not speaking it perfectly either. And but then there are some words that we get hung up on that are totally different. Oh, it's so much fun. Like if you love languages and cultures, definitely come out here. Definitely worth it. I'll give you one more shot of Pingpe Resort. It's I call it lodge, but the official name is Pingpe Resort out here in amongst the Maroon communities here on the river, on the lovely Suriname River.